I am interested to report about the interpretation of assessment result, which is the last topic of our subject. And this comprise week 16, 17, and 18. So after 45 minutes of professor and student interaction, the participants will be able to differentiate non-reference from criterion reference assessment, compare the measure of central tendency and measure of variability, compute the mean, median, and mode of both ungroup and group, give advantages of the use of each of the measures of criteria, compute the range standard deviation system, mean deviation, and quartile, explain the importance of standard scores in comparing test results, compare the percentile and percentile ranks of set of scores, interpret the measures of variability, explain the difference between skewness and kurtosis, make graph illustrating skewness and kurtosis of given frequency, discuss the meaning and the use of correlation, and find the correlation coefficients of set of assessment data. So interpreting the assessment results. So there is a utilization of assessment result and grading and reporting of assessment result. So the statistical concept, we have statistics which plays a very important role in measurement and evaluation. Statistic techniques allows us to describe the performance of the student and to make scientific inferences about their performance. And the utilization of assessment result is more into the idea of randomness. So when you say the utilization of assessment, it's more into the central concept of statistics and the idea of randomness. Student score are assumed to be random realizations of presumably large numbers, which are unknown scores. And it is under the setting and with a propose on what is the use of the idea of statistics and analysis to make some sense of the information conveyed to us in random set of ideas. And original population and sample size are also considered here. So utilization of assessment result, which is the mean. The mean is a single numerical measure of a typical average performance of a group of students. So say for example, two sets of score, P is equivalent to mean of population and S means the sample size. So as you can see, here is a sample test result in which in the middle where you can see there is a red arrow, that is the mean of the grade. So this is a very good example of a DOH class record or an Excel file that is being utilized by one of the educators. Utilization of assessment results, which talks about standard deviation. So when you say standard deviation, it is a measure of average deviation or departure of the individual scores from the mean. So when you say standard deviation, we will be able to get the exact standard deviation if we follow the formula, which is the sum multiplied by the x minus mean, multiply it by 2, and which is divided with n minus 1 divided by 2. So that's how you get the standard deviation. However, there are certain Excel types of tool that we could somehow use in order for it to be easier for us to determine the standard deviation as well as the mean. By just clicking what particular number that you need to distinguish, it's been calculated. And as you can see here, this is another sample in which I was able to emphasize here the standard deviation. And you can see there that it's 5.8. This particular Excel shows also a very good example of computation as to how can we derive into the mean as well as the standard deviation of the student's grade. So this is actually been multiplied into percentage. So utilization of assessment result, and that includes the percentile ranks in national achievement tests or standard tests. The results are reported in terms of percentile rank and in terms of the standard score as well. So when you say percentile rank, it's the number of students who are able to score below the value plus or added with the number of students scoring equal to the value, and it's being divided with the total number of test takers. So say for example, supposed to be that there is 100 test takers who took the examination. 75 students were able to score lower than 82, and 6 students were able to score exactly the equal percentile rank of the score, which is equivalent to 82. So it is what? As you can see, there is a class record, which is a good example coming from DepEd. And basically, educators will just have to fill in their respective boxes as to how it is being computed. Sometimes class record is being utilized into the system. Informatics play a very important role in record keeping as well as the data privacy of our students. So looking at the example, we have the name of the students, the written works, which is 30% that it comprised, the performance task is 50%, and we also have the quarterly assessment, which is 20%. So most probably this is 100% score. The total perfect score is that percentage with the initial grade, and it's also being noted with its quarterly grade so that it would be um, carried over into the next grading session, or percentage of which is being taken part. So use of mode. So this use when you want to find the value which occurs most often. It's quick approximation of the average, and it is an inspection average. It is the most unreliable among three measurement of central tendency because its value is defined into some observation. You could also see that the properties of the mean here is that seeing that the mean can be calculated for many sets of numerical data, so it's always exists. And a set of numerical data has one and only one mean. And mean is the most reliable measure of central tendencies, and it takes into account every item in the set of data. And it's also greatly affected by extreme or deviant variables, which are the outliers. And it's also used only if the data are into interval relation. We also have control tendencies. So this is into the measure of central tendency, in which it tells us where the middle of the bunch of data lies. It also means that it's the most common measure of the central tendencies, and simply the sum of the numbers divided by the numbers of certain numbers of set of data. And this is also known as the average. And median is a number present into the middle when the number of the set data are arranged in ascending or descending order. If the numbers in the data set in even, and the median is the mean of the two middle numbers. And mode is the value that occurs most frequently in a set of data. So we also have the term skewness and kurtosis. When you say skewness, it's a distribution aggregation of observations which could be spread evenly around both sides of central tendencies, in which, as you can see there, in the illustration, mean is equivalent to 5 and median is equivalent to 5. And it is noted which is horizontal and vertical numerical system in which it is being represented. So such distribution are considered symmetrical with no skew. So when you see this particular example, as scores are weighted and distributed unevenly around the mean is pulled towards the extreme outlier and it diverges away from the median. So here, the mean is represented by 7 and median is represented by 5. Looking at the diagram, it states in here that we only have to fill in those in that particular part in which we will be able to put into consideration on what was given as to the mean and median. As you can see, when the outlying scores are on the higher end of the scale and the distribution becomes positively skewed, that is more into the positive part. And if it's into negative part, when the outlying scores are on the lower end of the scale, the distribution becomes negatively skewed. Kurtosis. When you say kurtosis, more likely the distribution of data, probably distributions are not all the same shape. Some are asymmetric and skew to the left to the right. Many times there are two values that dominate the distribution of the values. As you can see, it is being represented by decimal points in the vertical, and in the horizontal level are actually full number. And as you can see, dark colored is considered as more than 3, and less than 3 is color violet, and red is the normal distribution. Kurtosis is a measure to the peak of distribution and indicates high as to how high the distribution is around the mean. Okay, so there are types of kurtosis. You have mesokurtic, the distribution is identical to the normal distribution. The leptokurtic, a distribution that is more peak than normal, and the platykurtic, it's a distribution which is less peak than the normal. So what is the importance of skewness and kurtosis? This is a particular part in which we will be able to consider if students were able to meet the exact value as to what particular part are they able to perform in the exam. It's also very important to look at this too for the skewness and kurtosis so that we will be able to determine as to the positive and negative side and the type of curve of kurtosis. It's because it's one way for us to determine if we will be able to further the assessment or further evaluate based on the result. So grading system, we also have the test assess grading. So assessment of students' performance is really essential, knowing that how students is progressing in course, and incidentally, how teachers are also performing with respect to the teaching process. So here with the grading system, it is clear that there appears to be a need to convert raw score values into corresponding standard grading system. So as you can see, this is actually a table, but I wasn't able to really divide the columns. But you can see there that there are 3 columns. Say for example, on the columns, it's labeled the Philippine College and University and the numerical value and the corresponding grade. However, in the basic education, it's more into the percentage and it's converted into whole numbers, most probably 95 to 80 or even lower than 80. Grading and reporting of assessment results. So norm reference grading, when you see norm reference, it's a grading system where the student's grade is placed into relation to the performance of the group. Example, A is equivalent to 30, 40, 50s, 55, 65, 70, 75, 80, and 85. And B is 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, and 100. So there is a division between the higher number as well as the lowest number, but not totally that the grading system in which it's just only it's just only one, but it's where the relation to the performance of the group on how it is being divided. Grading and reporting of assessment result. Norm reference grading example as what was being mentioned. So in the first class, now as you can see, the students who got a raw score of 75 would get a grade of 80. Okay. Now, while the second class, the same grade of 80 would correspond to a raw score of 90 based on the reference that is being shown. So grading and reporting of assessment results. Norm reference grading, it's more into grading system based on pre-established formula regarding the percentage or ratio of students within a whole class who will be assigned with each grade or mark. It is also therefore known to be advanced as to what percent of the student would pass or fail given the course of the subject. So grading and reporting of assessment results. So norm reference grading, you have here 3 different columns. As you can see, 3 different columns in which the grade, the mark, and the percentage. So say for example, 1.0 is excellent and it's top 15% of the class, 1.25, good, but next 15% of the class will be able to get such. 1.5 average, which has the next 45% of the class. 2 is poor pass, next 15% of class, and 3 is failure, which is bottom 100% of the class. Grading and reporting of assessment results. So according to Guzman Santos of 2007, norm reference grading and norm reference grading students when they try to work individually, they actually in competition to achieve a standard of performance that would classify them into a desired grade range. It's very essential to promote competition among students or pupils in the same class. So grading and reporting of assessment based on criteria and reference grading. Guzman Santos of 2017 was able to emphasize that since the criterion measure used in criterion reference grading is being measured that ultimately rests with the teachers. So there are also considerations that we have to consider. First is the criterion should not be based on one's teacher's opinion or standards. It should be collaboratively arrived at. That means to say that it shouldn't be biased. Once the criterion is established, it must be made public and open to public scrutiny. That it does not become an arbitrary and subject to the whim and caprices of the teacher. So there are two different types no of grading system. First is the non-reference grading and the criterion reference grading. So in the norm reference grading, students' grade is placed in relation to the to perform to the performance of the group. Pre-established formula regarding the both percentage ratio of the students. And at the same time, students work in competition to achieve standard of performance that will classify them into desired grade range. Criterion reference, on the other hand, students must achieve the target in order to obtain the passing grade in the course, regardless of how the other students were able to perform in class. And based on fixed criterion system, it's also student can help fellow student in a group work without necessarily worrying about lowering his grade in that course. So the importance of standard scoring and comparing tests. So standard score, it's more like a score based on a scale with an average score of a mean of 100. A standard score also have a comparison of the student's performance across different tests and between peers. The standard score, more commonly referred to as Z-score. This is helpful because it allows us to calculate the probability of the score occurring within the normal distribution and enables us to compare two scores that are from different normal distribution. And standard test scores is being measured of the test taker's knowledge of subject or a set of skills that can be used as a basis for comparison, but only if used properly. So grading reporting of assessment results. So four questions in grading, according to Marinelia Snibibsky of 2007 of the Center for Teaching Effectiveness at the University of Texas, Austin, possess four intriguing questions relative to grading. So first, should grades reflect absolute achievement level or achieve relative to others of the same class? Second question, should grade reflect the achievement only or non-academic components such as attitude, speed, and diligence? And should grades report status achieved or amount of growth? And how can several grades on diverse scale combine to give a single mark? Grading and reporting of assessment results. So there are two different systems. We have the alternative grading system and the non-graded evaluation. Here in the Philippines, in the alternative grading system, other colleges, universities, faculties, schools, and institutions are actually utilizing this. And non-graded evaluation is being practiced usually based on beliefs of the grades, which is being introduced and an inappropriate and distracting element of competition into the learning process. So the process of deciding on grading system is very complex one. The problem faced by an instructor who tries to design a system which will be accurate and fair are common to many managers or teachers, senior teachers attempting to evaluate those whom he or she is responsible. So that would be it, Doc, for my report. Here are my references for the report in APA Style 7th edition. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.